Increasing numbers of people are waking up to the need to live more harmoniously with the earth, with one another, and with all life on the planet. We cannot continue as we have been, and other ways of living are possible. I am your host, Epiphany Paris, and I am one of the many holding space for this transformation. In this time, we can reconnect and share our gifts with one another. This show features conversations with rainbow warriors, healers, activists, artists, writers, farmers, and many other people who are living the questions and living the change in their personal lives. This show will focus on practical solutions, radical strategies, paradigm-shifting ideas, inspiring people, and spiritual transformations. This is the space between. In this space between the destructive times we have been living and the holistic way of life that is possible, we are here. What will we do with the time we have? I now have Byron on the line. Byron Ballard is a ritualist, teacher, urban farmer, speaker, and writer. She facilitates weekly services at the Mother Grove Goddess Temple and offers classes and workshops. She writes an ongoing blog called My Village Witch and has recently published Stobs in Ditchwater, an introduction to Hill Folks Hoodoo. How are you doing today, Byron?
I am doing great. It's good to talk to you, Epiphany.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you, too. It's been a while.
It has been a while. It's been months and months.
Yep.
I'm tired after that introduction, though. That's a lot of stuff I do.
Well, I'm sure it's one of those deals where it's day by day, you just do what's in front of you and you keep moving forward.
It's true, and I'm sitting here now at my dining room table looking at jams and jellies I've been canning, so at least that part of being an urban farmer is done for now.
That sounds wonderful. Can I come over and, have some jams and jellies?
You could, except you're very far away, and I don't even think I can put these in the mail, can I? Is it liquid? Not. Is it perishable? Yeah, I think not.
All right, so where do you want to start? Do you want to start with Mother Grove Goddess Temple?
Sure, I'm happy to start there. Mother Grove is, I'm very proud to say, one of the few modern goddess temples in the United States. We have a few sister temples in different places. Most of them are in California, to be honest, or otherwise on the West Coast. But we formed as a temple, we've been doing community work for years and years and years, and then formed as a 501c3, so we have official nonprofit status government, which makes us kind of a creepy official church. So we're an official goddess-worshiping church, which is hilarious here. We're down in Asheville on the buckle of the Bible Belt. And it's funny to us that the place where we are doing our services now is right across, catty-cornered across the street from the First Baptist Church downtown.
Nice. Although Asheville is a bit more accepting than probably some places in the South.
Oh, absolutely. And the First Baptist Church, they're wonderful people. I know two of their senior pastors, and because I also do interfaith work in the area.
Yeah.
Have done lots of different programs with them, and it's a wonderful community to do the kind of work we do, and because there is a lot of interfaith engagement, and there are, and I have good friends, frankly, and colleagues who are in religions that and some places would not get along very well with me or even with each other. So we were lucky that way in Asheville. We're now in a building that used to be an old hospital. Well, it used to be a new hospital, but it's the old hospital building. And we're in the basement of that. It's a funky old brick building. We believe that the suite of rooms we occupy used to be the morgue for the hospital. Interesting. And we do Sunday morning small meditations and devotionals in that space. And then we do public rituals for the Wheel of the Year. We do those in different locations. If it's good weather, we do those outside. And if it's cold weather, if the seasons have turned, we have a wonderful relationship with the Episcopal Diocese of Western North Carolina, and specifically with the Cathedral of All Souls. And they welcome us to their parish hall 4 or 5 times a year to do celebrations of the old holidays. So we have a good working relationship with all those folks. We're very blessed that way.
That's great that you have that.
Our plan ultimately is to acquire some land and to build a cob structure that has a living roof and water catchment systems and gardens. That's the big plan, and that's going to take a lot of people power to get that done. So right now we are being patient and waiting for the right land to come, and then it will be all hands on deck while we literally dance the temple into being. So we'll have to talk again when we're in that process, because that's going to be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'd absolutely love to talk to you about it when it's happening as well.
Excellent.
Yeah. So even though in some ways Asheville is a pretty tolerant city, everything is not quite flowers and sunshine either, right? There's been a lot of issues this last year with religious intolerance, particularly in the schools.
We had an incident that happened almost a year ago now, where one of the county elementary schools was the recipient of a box of Gideon Bibles.
Has that been a whole year already?
Yeah, well, it happened in December of last year. So
okay.
Close.
Wow.
And they were passively distributed. So word went around the school that the Bibles were there and anyone who wanted could go and get one. Well, that's illegal. So sadly for the school system, or I'll take that back and I'll say happily for freedom in this part of the country, one of the parents at that school is in fact an active pagan, and she's a pagan priestess. So she rallied her forces and she went to the school and said, so you allow this Christian material in. If I bring you a box of pagan material, will that be distributed the same way? And the principal said, oh, of course it will. And this was the day before winter holidays started. We had a sneaking suspicion that the school figured it would all die down by January. But what they didn't realize is that this particular parent is well connected electronically, and she just put out an all-call on Facebook and on some other places asking pagan authors who had appropriate materials if they had books that they would donate. So the very first day of school in January, I went with her to deliver 2 boxes of books that had been donated from generous and loving pagan authors. And as we suspected would happen, the principal and the assistant principal called us into the office and explained that the county school system was reviewing their policy on distribution of religious materials, and they really couldn't hand those out, but they would be glad to hold on to them until the policy had been reviewed, and then kind of look them over and make sure they were appropriate. So we looked at each other and went, no, I don't think so. And the books went back to the car. and have since been distributed to pagan prison ministries in western North Carolina. So they did not go to waste. Happily, they went to people who can really use them. But what it did was open up an enormous can of worms, and we spent 4 months at school board meetings talking about this issue. We were blessed with strong allies in the North Carolina ACLU and in Citizens United, and especially with Selena Fox up at Lady Liberty League. We just kept hammering away, and they had lawyers and we had lawyers, and it was very clear to them, I think, that we weren't going to back down on this, and something was going to have to be done. And what came out of it was the superintendent of the county school system created a faith-based leader advisory council. And I am sitting on that. I sit on that with some Baptists, some Methodists, Episcopalians, Unitarians, but it's a group of faith leaders in our area who are there to advise the superintendent, so that if it's something he doesn't think he knows one way or the other, and if it's iffy from their legal department, then they contact us, and we've been in meetings with them all summer. The school system has developed some really superlative training materials for staff and for students about religious tolerance and about the place of religion in public schools. And there is a place for religion. We talk a lot about separation of church and state, which is vital, and it is, in fact, our First Amendment freedoms in that area depend on there being a good separation. But we're also in a culture where a lot of people are very, very religious. I myself am a very religious person. So bringing education to the educators really was the best first step we could do. Now, we're monitoring the school system, and we will be monitoring it probably forever. But we have a good working relationship with them. The local Interfaith Council, which is the Mountain Area Interfaith Forum, has a good working relationship with both city and county schools, and we're going to keep an eye on it, because the number one thing is that kids be safe, all kids be safe in school, and not feel like they have a right to proselytize other kids or bully other kids because of their religion. So we're pleased about the outcome of that. It was a lot of work, and it was a lot of work by a lot of people. So I would advise anyone who gets in a pickle like that to gather their allies around them, and you'll be surprised at the people who support you.
Yeah. Well, I was following it from a distance because I was already living up here when it happened. But it was a lot of talking. It was a lot of conversations that took place on editorial comments and all kinds of...
Well, there's a lot of confusion about what is legal and what isn't, and a lot of the people who were so upset were saying things like, you mean my child can't pray in school? And that's not what this means at all. Kids pray in school all the time. Kids pray for their lunch. Kids pray before tests. Kids pray before games. What this means is that a teacher, a coach, or a volunteer with the school who is basically acting as an agent of the state, because these are taxpayer-funded schools, can't lead the class in prayer. That's what it means. It doesn't even mean that the teachers themselves can't pray, because they can pray over their meals. They can go to the teacher's lounge and have a group of people who have a regular prayer meeting at lunch. They can do all of that, but the ability to engage in religious talk and activity in a way that is potentially coercive, that's what's illegal. And I couldn't have talked like that 10 months ago, but I'm really familiar with the First Amendment, with the laws around the First Amendment. I was forced to, but glad to know all that about it. So it's a matter of educating. We say that all the time. Anybody who's in a minority religion has the blessed opportunity on more occasions than sometimes we would wish to talk to people about what our religions are and what we do.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's important that you're doing it. It's not just the principle of the matter. I mean, even though there is that. I mean, but the kids who are going to those schools who are not in the mainstream religions, it can be really hard to have other people trying to force their faith on you or judging you for your faith, or, you know, the kinds of persecution that can happen. And so
there was a girl in middle
safety.
school who reported to us that we were gathering stories. She reported that they had been discussing world religions in a class, probably a history class, and she had said what her religion was, which was Wicca, and the teacher literally laughed at her in front of the class and said, "But that's not a real religion."
Aww.
And when I told the school board that, they were appalled. They were simply appalled. So part of this, the school board has been as helpful as they could reasonably be. And I think they've been surprised at some of the things they've learned have gone on in their schools.
Yeah. Well, I was so glad that you had her back, or that, you know, the lady who reported it, who brought the books in. I was glad that you were involved with that, because you're such like a fiery, powerful person. Like I wouldn't want to necessarily be on the other end of a conflict with you.
Well, I think that's a compliment. I've been doing this a long, long time. I've been a Wiccan since 1975, and I've been an out pagan and witch practically my whole life. So it's and I'm fairly non-threatening in spite of the kind things you just said about me. So I think most people feel like they can talk to me about things, and that's good, because again, education. It's about letting people ask the scary questions, and
well, and a lot of people just don't know.
People who still ask things like, "Do you worship Satan and sacrifice babies?"
Right.
They don't know any more than that. That's sad.
Yeah. It's amazing how much people don't know. And that's, you know, a lot of people are still closeted. A lot of people. Or at least partly closeted. Like maybe they tell their friends, but they don't tell their coworkers. You know, a lot of people who are pagan are at least...
everyone knows except their families. Sometimes they have to be closeted from their own families. That is very sad.
Yeah. Yeah. That sure can be a hard thing. If it's okay with you, I'd like to step away from this topic a little bit and talk about the tower time, because that's something you talk about on Facebook a lot.
I do, don't I?
Yeah.
I've gotten quiet about it recently, though, because, I mean, we're obviously in it, so there's not much more I can say to cheer people on. There is a card, and I'm sure that many of your listeners are familiar with the tarot, but there is a card in the tarot deck that's called the Tower, and sometimes the Falling Tower. And it is my belief that we are currently, and have been for several years now, we're in a deeply transitional time, culturally speaking, and I call that transitional time Tower time, because I believe that the generations that are alive on the planet now are present for a transition out of some of these old, toxic, hierarchical systems. I think some of them are falling down. Finally, slowly, and just like the card in the tarot deck, there's some people that are leaping from the top of that tower. There are people down below who are creating circles of healing and support for when the tower finally does fall. But I think that we are honored in a way to be present at this time, though I think for an awful lot of people it's really frightening. I've been noting lately from my clients and also the folks that come to Mother Grove and that I do some counseling with, that their dreams are fraught and frightening and almost unintelligible, and that they have a feeling energetically that they're on the edge, that they're at the edge of a cliff. So So that's what Tower Time is. It's about finding the ways in which we can be strong as the culture changes, finding those parts of the existing culture that we choose to keep and to integrate, and frankly, finding those things in the culture that have not served us, sometimes for hundreds of years, sometimes for thousands of years, and being unafraid to engage the change of that. That's a big thing. And it's something we all can do. Wherever we are, whether we are a person of means or a person who has not many resources, we can still be looking at the world of the world, as I call it, and thinking about how we want it to be and what we can do as participants in the culture to bring about the changes that we want. But no, I don't think it's about the Mayan calendar. I don't think it's about the Mayan calendar at all.
Could you give a few examples of things that you see people doing to help things change?
Yes. Down here, we are really involved in issues of food sovereignty, of permaculture, and that is I don't deal much in hope, personally. I kind of follow Derek Jensen on that one. But I think there is something that is uplifting about seeing people remove their front lawns and create organic gardens. There is just this beautiful movement that's happening with the mainline denomination churches in the area. It began with a big Presbyterian church in the north part of the town, and they hired an organic gardener who was also, I think, someone involved with permaculture, and they dug up their big old beautiful front yard and put in rows where they plant vegetables. And you drive past there and you see beautiful collard greens and peppers and okra, and they literally dug up their front yard and they're feeding people who are hungry. And what is more beautiful than that? Religiously and spiritually speaking, that's just extraordinary. And because of the lead they have taken in doing that, there are other churches in the area who, to be fair, those luscious front lawns that a lot of Protestant churches love, they're expensive to maintain. So not only are they getting rid of the maintenance of something that was just a visual, like a reflecting pool for the church, but they're also feeding people. They're also bringing their congregations together to get their hands dirty and to really do for other people. And that is a huge sign of where we can go in the culture if we choose to do that.
Yeah. What do you feel your work is to help people through the Tower Time?
Well, Kevin knows I talk about it all the time, don't I? I am part of a group of women that began as a book group. We started reading Gerda Lerner's Creation of Patriarchy. We call ourselves the Lerner Book Group. And we come together, and our next project coming up, in addition to reading a book, is that we're going to do a series of women's wellness classes. We're going to bring in people who understand breast health. We're bringing in some people who understand menstrual extraction and reproductive health, because that is a huge issue. And with the current climate, politically speaking, that could be quite a danger to women's health, is the inability to have safe and available abortion, as well as safe and effective birth control. So those things that we 70s feminists worked so hard to have and had the freedom to enjoy, there's no guarantee that our daughters and granddaughters will enjoy that freedom. So we stay on that. And I laughingly call myself an urban farmer, but I encourage everyone, if you own your home and you have a yard or a little bit of land, to put it into production. Grow your tomatoes, grow spinach, grow whatever it is your family loves to eat. And and learn to process it yourself so that you don't have to think about, oh my goodness, does this spinach have E. coli in it because it traveled from California or Florida and I got it at my grocery store. You can be pretty sure it's not going to have E. coli on it as long as you didn't go to the bathroom in the middle of your spinach patch.
Right. Well, you don't have to worry about genetically modified food then and
yeah. Oh, and
stuff like that, the pesticides and
yep. Because you know where it's been. And just on a kind of a foodie note, because I'm a little bit of a foodie, if I go into my backyard and I cut an eggplant and I bring it in and I wash it and cook it immediately, the flavor is just extraordinary. So I take this living organism and I take in the nutrients from it, and it didn't get picked not quite ripe so that it could be shipped 3,000 miles or 1,500 miles so that I could buy it at my grocery store. It came right from the backyard, so the deliciousness of it is something to definitely be aware of.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. That's another area that there's a need of education. Because I remember talking to an older family member of mine and, saying that I really try to buy organic food when I can, which isn't always, but, she said, oh, that's gross. And I'm like, I stammered because I didn't really have a response to it immediately. Like, organic food is just food without chemicals in it. How is that gross? And it tastes so much better than, all the chemical-laden stuff. But she just didn't know that. She just had this idea in her head.
It was gross because it was grown with, cow manure or something like that?
No, she just... Well, I mean, honestly, the reason was because she once had an organic apple, but it was a not good apple. And so she just had this idea in her head that stayed for years. It's been in her head for years that organic food is disgusting. And I had to explain it to her that organic food is how your parents or grandparents grew it. I mean, it's just food. That's what they called food.
Exactly. There's that funny Facebook meme, organic food, or what your grandparents called food.
Yeah. But people, not everybody even knows that, so
yeah,
we've it's been a couple generations at least that people have gotten really used to grocery store chains and grocery store food and processed food, and it's...
But we know that during the Second World War, there was a real push to do victory gardens because we wanted to be able to send all of our resources to fight the Hun in Europe and then fight everybody else everywhere else. But so there was a real push to dig up your yard and put in tomatoes. But now there are all sorts of sort of gated communities and those kind of intentional sort of communities, I guess, where they don't want you to have a clothesline. They don't want your garden to look like anything other than just a square of green with a few flowers in. And that's always surprising to me. I always think we are not too far from our farmer roots, but I think a lot of people really are.
Yeah. Well, speaking of roots, you're pretty close to yours. Just in general, not necessarily farmer roots, but just your roots.
Yep.
You actually know what yours are like.
Yeah, I've been in the same place for a long time. The neighborhood I live in now, my great-grandparents moved here at the end of the 19th century. And I didn't grow up in this neighborhood because my mother had moved away by then, but I grew up not far from here. I grew up in the western part of the county instead of downtown. But my daughter is the fifth generation of our family to live in the same neighborhood. Not the same house, but in the same neighborhood. And that's fairly unusual.
Yeah.
I often am in groups of people where one of the first things they say, they introduce themselves and where they're from and when they moved here and why they moved or whatever. And I was in one a couple of years ago, and we were going around the room, and we had to say how long we'd been in the area. And it got to me, and I went, well, with the exception of graduate school and living abroad for a little while, I've been here about 52 years. And you could see them look at me like they were doing the math, like, was I really 80 years old? And I did, and then it was like, oh, and somebody said, so you're a native. And it was one of those, I call them my Papua New Guinea moments, where you suddenly feel like someone with a bone through your nose, and that anthropologists are going to need to come and study you because you're so weird and unusual.
That's funny. Well, Asheville, a lot of people are newbies. It's a big town of transplants, more than other places are, I'd say. But I gotta say, I mean, it's something that I envy you. Like, I have no sense of roots at all. I mean, except for with the planet, like, I feel like she's, my mother and my home. But beyond that, I don't have any sense of belonging anywhere.
And how do you think that affects you?
Well, it's always been something I've longed for. I mean, as a kid, we moved so much that I never put down roots anywhere. And as an adult, like I lived in one town for 8 years in Wisconsin, and that was the longest I've ever lived anywhere. I mean, like, I thought Asheville was my home when I moved there in 2009. I moved there summer of 2009, when my daughter was 1 year old, and I thought that was my home. And then it didn't work out, very sadly. And so leaving there was really hard for me because it was the first place in my life that I had felt like I was home. And it was partly the mountains, because I loved the mountains so much, and I went through everything I could to stay there. I mean, I gave up so many things to stay there. And I went through trial after trial after trial after trial after trial, like one after another. I continued to be tested, and I continued saying, I'm going to stay no matter what. But then, like, it just got to be too many things, and I just couldn't. So I'm still searching. I'm still trying to find...
Yeah, the problem with this area, because it is so popular, is that people retire here. They sell their $250,000 home in New York, and then they move down here, and they spend $200,000 on a home, and that drives up the prices. But we don't have really any industry here. So the only way you can make a living, really, unless you're a professional like a doctor or lawyer or whatever, professor, the only way most people can make a living is with fairly minimum wage stuff. And if you're making minimum wage here, it's not a living wage anywhere, but the housing here is unaffordable.
I wasn't even able to find minimum wage jobs.
Yeah.
I couldn't find anything, and I was applying everywhere, and I have like a solid work history and everything, but it just, I mean, that's how it goes. So I'm hoping that, I find somewhere to put down real roots someday. That's my dream.
Well, and if that's your dream, you'll do that.
It's a funny time.
Not everybody needs that, though. Some people are perfectly happy being kind of wanderers, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I have a high tolerance for it, but it's not what I want. I definitely want to belong somewhere where there's community and connectedness, and I can feel the earth, and the earth, we have a rapport.
Yeah.
Which
community's tricky, though. I mean, a lot of people in Asheville, they're trying to build community, but community it's a hard thing to sort of consciously say you're going to be building. It's almost a byproduct of just people living close together and being decent human beings.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of a hard time to build. I don't know. It's kind of a hard time to find stability right now, like this whole tower time thing. Like, things are so up in the air everywhere.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to place roots somewhere because you don't know what's going to happen.
Stability is not, it's not big right now. Though I think a lot of people long for it. I think this current political season it's politicians saying, no, we can help you put down roots and find stability. No, we can do that. No, we can do that. But I don't think any of them really have any idea how to go about doing that.
No. Well, they're so tied into the current systems that are failing. I mean,
yeah,
there's no way they'd be able to find a solution. There's stopgaps, and those aren't even really being introduced. So there's
right. We're not even getting those.
Yeah, we're not even getting the things that would keep us okay for a couple years. As a witch, what kind of tools can you offer people to help them through this time?
The most important thing, I always say the most important thing, and then I introduce 8 or 9 different things. some of the most important things that one can do. One is to ground yourself, to find a grounding exercise that works for you. For a lot of pagan people, we'll do a kind of simple meditation about roots coming out from the bottoms of your feet and seeking the earth, and so that you really feel, even if it's a place you're going to be in forever or that you're going to be in for very long, that you have roots in the place that you are in, that you observe the cycle of the seasons, that you spend time in nature. Pagans give a lot of lip service to being an earth religion, but an awful lot of us spend way more time sitting in a computer chair than we do out with our hands on Mother Earth. So those things, figuring out how it is you be an earth religion in an urban setting, that's tricky, but that's important. And finding like-minded people, finding allies. And sometimes those allies are going to be in unexpected places. You may find that the few people that constitute the pagan community in your particular town are people who are massively dysfunctional as human beings. It's not a reflection on their paganism, it's a reflection on the culture and how they've reacted in the culture. So find people who are like you. If you're a pagan and you don't like the pagans around you, go talk to some Unitarians. Talk to some liberal Christians and find those people who can help ease the transitions for you and for whom you also ease transitions. Volunteer in your community. Feed people who are hungry. The notion that we have so much abundance in this country and there are children that don't eat much in the summer because they don't get free lunches then is appalling. How's that?
Yeah.
Some of that was as a witch, but some of it was just as being a human being.
Yeah, I mean, those are all good things to be doing, for sure.
And embrace life. Just embrace it. Know that you are a living being. I do not love the notion that I sometimes hear, which is, I am not an earthly being on a spiritual journey. I'm a spiritual being on an earthly journey. For me, I am a hardcore polytheist pagan. I'm a dirt worshiper. And I am an earthly being. And I'm proud of that, and I'm happy about that. I rejoice in that. So every time we say to ourselves, oh, but, it's just the earth, and really it's not about my earthiness, it's about my spirit. Well, it's about both because they are tied together because we are earth beings. We are made of water. We are made of the elements, earth and water and the fire that keeps us going and the air that is our communication and imagination and that we breathe in to keep the machine working. So embracing the life force and honoring that, however you do that, I think it brings a lot of comfort in times when there is comfort that is needed, which is all times, really.
Well, one of the things that I do like about paganism is that notion of the body and the spirit not being separate things, and so it's not a matter of transcendence.
Yes.
Of transcending above your earthly body, because I think that's a way that sometimes there's some new age things that I really like and get into, but I think that sometimes it goes that way, and sometimes I wonder if it's not just a relic from puritanical history that a lot of us, of the country.
And well, it's also a relic of the vast majority of earth religions. People are converts. And in this country, they are converts out of one or more Christian traditions. So they have to carry some of that with them when they do the conversion thing. And some of it they carry unhappily and angrily. But some of it has the ability to comfort even while it's confusing.
Yeah. Well, I certainly am not trying to make a blast against any religion. I'm just the idea of separating the two things, like, to me, it seems like part of what the problem is with everything right now is this idea of being separate. And so, we don't mind pillaging the earth because we're separate from it. And there's a fear and a need of conquering that go together, and a feel, and my big thing is, and as a lot of times, sometimes when, like on Facebook, it asks what your spirituality is or what your religion is. And I consider myself pagan, but I don't actually say pagan because I feel like it gets in the way sometime. And what I say is, like, I believe in interconnectedness, because to me, like, that is the foundation behind a lot of belief systems, is that we are all connected. So everything I do affects the world about me and vice versa.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I like that interconnectedness.
But that's what I get out of my spiritual experiences, is just a sense of oneness with everything. And that's where I do like some of the New Age thinking, is because there is some of that sentiment in there too, is that we're all one. Everything is one.
Yeah.
So, do you want to talk a little bit about your blog?
Yes. Hooray. I really love blogging. You can't tell it right now because I've not been very faithful with it recently, but I was asked about, 4 or 5 years ago, I guess now, by our local Gannett daily paper if I would do a blog on their website. And I said, well, I'd consider it. What are you thinking about? And they weren't interested in me sort of flying beneath the radar. The phrase they used is, we want you to let our readers know which is which, and what's going on in the earth-based community, and just give us, give our readers an idea of what it is you do and practice and all that. So I wrote for them for several years. In fact, only this year did they change their blog platform so that they didn't have any more community bloggers. And they were very kind and very sweet, but they said, so we're really not going to be able to support your blog anymore. So I moved to a WordPress site, and I am Asheville's Village Witch. It is a wonderful place to dump a lot of information, speaking of education, of letting people know my point of view, because no pagan speaks for the whole of paganhood, or what they sometimes call Paganistan. We're all terribly, terribly independent. So I can say what it is I do and what it is I think, and I have a particular bent in what I do because I practice Appalachian folk magic, and in addition to that, I'm a Dianic priestess, so I do worship the divine in exclusively female form, but do it in a mixed gender setting. So it's a little confusing for everybody. I love the opportunity to share information and answer questions. Sometimes I get intensely rude people who demand to know all sorts of things about my religion. A lot of those people, by the way, are pagan people who are intensely rude, but Christians can be rude too. But they're rude out of a sense of fear and notion that something that they don't understand is necessarily dangerous. So I love being able to try to talk calmly and reasonably with people and give them a chance to get to know not only me, but to get to know my spirituality through me. And sometimes that works pretty well. Sometimes I think they go away shaking their head, saying, oh, what a nice woman. It's a shame she's going to hell. That's okay. That's okay, too.
Well, I mean, there's those of us who read your blog who aren't demanding that kind of information. We just like reading the texture of your life.
Oh, thank you.
So it's definitely, even if you have people walk away and shake their heads, and even if they never reevaluate those ideas, it still accomplished something. But you never know with people. I mean, because sometimes you can plant a seed that doesn't germinate for a while. But then, later on they're at least more tolerant or something, so you can change people in ways that you don't see.
And it may be that by meeting someone who did not seem threatening to them and who seemed, and I'm putting quotes around this word, who seemed normal, that the next time they encounter someone from a minority religion, their first thought won't be, this is someone who is completely other and someone who is dangerous and someone that I should mistreat in some way. Maybe they'll stop and let their natural curiosity have a little sway and find out something they didn't know before.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in curiosity. I'm an intensely curious person myself.
Well, and it's interesting because I've been in their viewpoint, like I've come from that perspective, so I can sort of see it from both ways. I used to want to. Oh yeah, when I was 16, my life goal was to become a missionary and save people's souls from hell.
Wow.
And I believed it so firmly that it just encompassed my entire reality. I'm not a big fan of people proselytizing to me, but at the same time, I can kind of understand that that's the shape of their reality. That's the shape of it. I mean, in their world, if not all Christians, but if you're in that position where you believe that someone is going to hell unless they accept Jesus as a personal Lord and Savior, then that's what you believe. And so, that shapes everything. And so it is out of a place of love sometimes that you want to help people because you really don't want to see them burn in hell. I understand that.
Yeah, and honestly, I do too, because I think for a lot of people, especially kind of new converts to earth religions, they're carrying some baggage with them from families and maybe from a less than healthy religious situation in a Christian church. But when they complain that their mom or their grandma doesn't understand and they're really angry at them, Grandma's not trying to get another notch on her belt. Grandma firmly believes that if you die in the state you're in now, she won't see you, that you won't be in the same place, and that is hurtful to her. So the sense of desperation to get you back to toeing the line is not so much, for many people anyway, in my experience, it's not so much about making sure the numbers add up. It's about making sure people you love are going to be where you're going to be.
Yeah.
It's hard to see that, I think, for some people. But
well, and from the perspective of someone, who does believe in the whole heaven hell thing, as being a strict dichotomy like that, I mean, to see people who are not doing it, not only do you feel bad for them, but if there's any tiny part of doubt in you about what you believe, then it is scary and threatening.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about it from that.
It is, because I'll tell you I'll tell you my unconversion story quickly, and then we'll keep on going with talking about your work. But I decided to convert a friend of mine who was Muslim. Well, she had been raised Muslim, but she was agnostic, really. And so I planned it all out ahead of time. I had all my arguments lined up, everything that I had been taught to do to try to convince somebody. And I had been teaching Sunday school and everything and all that stuff. And anyway, so we went on a walk, and I remember it was a summer night, and the stars were very clear above us. And we walked, and I talked, and luckily she didn't get mad at me, because it was kind of rude, but what I didn't take into account was that she had been on the debate team for 6 years. So I was over my head, and she managed to find the places in my belief system that had holes that I hadn't even realized. And so in the span of a 2-hour conversation, I realized that I didn't believe anymore. And I'm not saying that that's what, anybody should do to anybody, but but I kind of had it coming because I took her on,
That's a terrific story.
Yeah. And as we were walking, it felt as if there had been a big glass dome over the sky, and I got a crack in it, and it opened. And I felt infinity. I felt it. I felt exactly how small we were. and how big everything was. And I felt how my beliefs had kept the world feeling sort of small and safe for me. And I'm not saying that's how other Christians are. I'm saying that's my experience. And it was the most terrifying and awesome experience at the same time. And it took me years to get my feet on any kind of ground after that. It was, wow. And so I think people
Did you do a lot of exploring after that?
Well, first I just went to Christian religion, so I thought, well, maybe I don't like Lutheranism. So I went to a Mormon church, and I went to a, Catholic church, and I went to, but it was interesting because I conversed with Jesus too. If we're going to go into woo, we might as well go all the way woo, right? Like, I had some conversations where I said, hey, Jesus, like, what's up with this? And I got the sense from him that it was okay. But it was a really scary time. And then I ended up dating a guy who was Shinto Buddhist, and he had a goddess that he worshipped. And I said, hey, that sounds great. And so he brought me to a book that had a list of gods and goddesses, and Isis sort of jumped out at me. So then I became a devotee of hers, and it sort of started there. I wouldn't have called myself pagan for a few years after that still, but it started with, finding a deity that I really connected with. But yeah, so I think people sense that it can be that earth-shattering, and so there is a fear, there's a threat. That if I expand my idea of what is true and real, then everything could fall apart.
Wow.
And I mean, that's just my sense. I could be wrong, but I wonder if people aren't scared that might happen, like in an intuitive, deep, subconscious kind of way.
Yeah, quite possibly. Quite possibly. We are still such primitive beings in so many ways. We have our hierarchy of needs, and we need those needs met. And if we can get beyond that, fine. But we may not ever get beyond that. Just finding a way to meet those needs.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a lot of what's hard for people right now in this time is because what we've believed to be true about the world, not in a religious sense necessarily, but what we've believed to be true about the world, our old definitions aren't working anymore.
Yeah.
And America isn't the place that we thought it was. The American dream is this myth that... and
it probably always was. It's not that America's become something different. It's that...
Yeah. Well, we grew up a little bit more, and the myth is starting to crack a little bit. And I think that's terrifying for people. And so a lot of people, I think, fight knowing that things aren't working. They just want to try to make things work instead. And I think that's where work like yours comes in, because, the offerings of ritual or, some of the personal client work you do with the divination and that sort of thing, and the connecting with the elements and the earth, like that is a way that people can weather the change, because paganism allows for change.
In fact, paganism embraces change.
Yeah.
That's the thing about it that I think can be very healing for people. We do the cycle of the seasons. We're all about change, and yet we know that in some ways, as that spirals in and spirals out, or as the wheel of the year turns, that yes, it is September, and this is the first September like this ever in the history of the world, but 12 months from now, chances are we're going to be in another September. So there is both the comfort of that, of having an annual kind of do-over, but there's also the sense that we can deal with change, that change is not necessarily cataclysmic and it's not earth-ending, it's simply change.
Yeah.
And helps take away some of the fear factor of all of it. We are fearful critters. And often we are the most fearful when we have the least really physically to be afraid of.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and paganism has that life, death, life thing. So, like when you're talking about embracing change, I mean, there's a sense of everything ends and it's reborn. Endings aren't permanent necessarily. You change form.
Yeah.
Just from observing cycles, leaves fall off a tree, they mold, bugs eat them and stuff, and they, become part of the earth. And then plants grow out of them.
Isn't that lovely to think of? I love thinking of that. It's very comforting to know that we are this small thing in a big infinite universe, nearly infinite universe. I love that. I find it very heartening.
Yeah, I do. I like it. And I feel like that comes through in your work. Like, that's something that I get from your work, is a sense of, like, continuation and connection to the earth, and cycles, like, being an okay thing even when they're scary. Yeah.
Well, good. Oh, I'm glad you do get that, because if we can manage to push ourselves past the fear, we really can begin to think in ways that are healthy and in ways that move away from surviving or tinkering with an existing system because that's going to fix it, and we can really embrace change on a larger scale. I hope. I may be making all of that up.
I hope so too. I mean, it's what we need.
Definitely.
Although you're not into hope, so I'm surprised that word even came up.
No, I don't deal much in hope. Seems like that's hope is when you leave it for somebody else to fix. I'm just going to hope that happens. Oh yeah, put Derek Jensen hope essay into a search engine and read his essay on hope. It's brilliant.
I hadn't realized that was your problem with hope. I don't know if I had, before this interview, known that was the issue you had with it. Yeah. I knew that you had a problem with hope, though. And I look at hope differently, so it's partly how you define it, too.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I think I can work really hard at something and hope it's going to work, but I can still keep on working on it even if I don't have hope. But that's more my definition, so I'll have to read his essay on it.
It's brilliant.
So in the last couple of minutes, we can talk about your book or anything else. We kind of got very chatty.
I know, we were chatty, weren't we? I had my first book published in June. It's called Stalbs and Ditchwater, a helpful and useful introduction to Hill Folks Hoodoo. It's a primer for Appalachian folk magic. It is available right now. Best thing to do is to go to my website, which is myvillagewitch.com, or send me an email at info@myvillagewitch.com, and I'll get you connected up. It'll be on Amazon fairly soon, but I wanted to do the bookstores in my area, the indies, first before I went a little larger than that. So cost is $20, $3 shipping, so $23. It's been gratifyingly well received. I did a book event at an independent bookstore near Western Carolina University this past Friday called City Lights in Silva, and we had a really big crowd. Every seat was filled, and they had a lot of good questions and told me lots of wonderful stories about folk magic in their own experience and in that of their families. So that's been it's been wonderful to be able to share the information that I have, but also to hear what other people do and have done. It's really good.
Very cool.
And you can learn what's happening at Mother Grove Goddess Temple by going to mothergroveavl.org and hear what programs are coming up for us.
Great. And all of those websites, as well as your email, are also just on the page that most people are probably listening from as well.
Great.
And that's at Connecting Between. And I just want to do a couple announcements real quick. If people want to get on the email list, you can just go to connectingbetween.com, the same website that you're listening at. And on the left-hand column, there's an email sign-up sheet, and that way you can be notified of upcoming guests. And also, I've decided to make the website more than just the radio show. It's going to include the weekly radio show as well, but I also would love to have it be more of a hub for anybody who has great stuff they're working on. So I am inviting guest bloggers, one-time guest bloggers, or musicians, or poets, or artists to let me know if you'd be interested in submitting a little something to share with on the website. I'd like to make it a place where people can go to be inspired and see great stuff that people are doing. So thank you so much, Byron, for coming on the show with me.
Well, it's been a delight. It's always good to talk to you.
Yay. Yeah, I love talking with you. And I'm going to keep on following your blog, and I hope the listeners do the same.
Excellent. And we will keep up with each other on Facebook.
Okay, sounds good.
Give your child a big hug from me.
Okay, I will.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.